and welcome. In this episode, I have the privilege of interviewing Mauricio Manhaes. Now, Mauricio is one of those individuals who is a true industry leader. The pedigree that backs Mauricio's career experience is Mauricio is in a league of his own regarding expertise in a field that I personally have a lot of interest and respect towards. It's service design. Now, certainly not the only field Mauricio maintains expertise in. However, it's where he made a significant pivot into from his early stage of his career and spent the better part of a decade at Savannah College of Art and Design, 10xing the service design department. He's worked in large financial institutions in service design capacity. He's worked in startups, and altogether, Mauricio is a wealth of insight. This is one that you do not want to miss. And my hope is it is actually one of what will soon become a number of great conversations with Mauricio. Not only is he a subject matter expert, he is grounded. He presents information in an accessible way and has an inspiring outlook on the future of how AI enables the next generation of human-centered businesses. I hold Mauricio in the highest level of esteem and respect. He is a true industry thought leader. So without further ado, I give you Mauricio Manhaes. And we're live. Mauricio, thanks for coming on today.
My pleasure.
We got a chance to sync up for a few minutes before hitting record here. And some of the themes that we were exploring were the field of service design as a whole, as a discipline, and how it's applied across organizations, large and small. I wonder if we could start the conversation this afternoon addressing perhaps a fundamental question, but a question that might be in the minds of a number of people in my community, in my audience, which are typically small, medium-sized business owners that may not even be aware of what service design is in the first place, or perhaps if they do, have an incomplete understanding. So perhaps as an anchor point, we could begin with, how do you define service design? What is it?
Many ways to define service design. I guess one that could be interesting for your audience, for small business, especially people that don't know service design, we tend to approach the definition of service design by asking these people, like, do you know what design does to cars, gadgets, furniture? And usually people say, yes, they make it beautiful and easy to use and great to have, and you feel good. So, okay, that service design does the same thing to services, right? And they usually, oh, okay, I got it.
Nice.
Right? So it's, people usually know, well, design, it's a fashion design or something that makes things beautiful, desirable, right? Easy to use. We do the same thing to services, right? And we all know a lot of services, not to mention any particular industry, but a lot of services that are not very pleasant to interact with, right?
Very little design went into the service.
Very little design went into the service.
That's a fantastic description.
Services.
When you see an individual who is as accomplished and esteemed as yourself in a particular field, it's akin to seeing someone that has summited a mountain. And I wonder if you could help illuminate the journey that you've taken and some of the key moments over the course of your career and even lifetime that's brought you to the place that you're at now. Where did it all begin for you?
So I'm from last century. I've been working for a while now. And at some point, I was involved in a large IT. I had a previous life of IT project manager, developing softwares, websites, and all sorts of things. And I was involved in a very large software implementation. And when we finally turned the key, the backlash was enormous, right? People start to say, no, this is ridiculous. The previous software, the software that they had before was a legacy, was developing internally. It's a large heavy industry in Brazil. And we were implementing a very top ranked software of the company, blah, blah, blah. So unquestionable, a good product. And the backlash was on. Like people said, oh, take it out. I want my old quirky software back. Then at some point, my manager pushing very hard because I didn't want to know. Said, no, we implemented by the book. This is a perfect product. If they can't handle this, fire them and hire people that can. And then my manager at some point, so if you don't go and talk to these people, we're going to have to replace you. I said, okay, let me go there and talk to these people that they don't know anything about computer. Okay. And then I went, and there was this lady, and I remember this, and the lady was she was my age now, the age that I have now, I guess. And she said, very friendly, very pleasant. You see all these papers, with the previous software, I would click here, click, no, I was done, right? Now with this new one, check, I have to go here, click there, go there, paste it here. So why don't you just add the button here? When she said, why don't you add the button here? I heard trumpets, like the sky opens. The lady's a genius. She's a genius. Oh my God, she could be doing my work. Why she's just this clerk? So I'll look around the room. So, and you, John, let me see what you. The same thing. Why don't you? Another trumpet. So another genius. And that's when at the end I understood that the only person that wasn't a genius in the room was me. Right? And I was shaken to my core, right? So I have this kind of nerdy take on things. What is the procedure? Let's follow the procedure, blah, blah, blah. And at some point, crashed all my previous understanding of how to develop software. And I'm not talking about like 200 years ago. I'm talking about 20 years ago. And I said, no, there must be a better way to do this. I might be limited, but I'm not stupid. I saw exactly the value that these people that are nowadays make sense, right? The user, talk to them, frontline people. They know what they're doing, right? Listen to them. And I said, no, there must be a better way to do this. But how can you have this broad take on involving, to me at that point, it seemed random. Right? Why this lady or that person or that other? Is there an approach that is holistic that I can kind of scan all the potential stakeholders and grab great ideas from them and compile? So trying to heal that, I found service design, and it was like, I never looked back. I quit the job and said, no, I'm not doing that anymore. I want to have a way that you take these people experiences to contribute to whatever you're doing. Right. And that's how I found service design almost 20 years ago, and never looked back. That's, and well, in a nutshell was this was a breaking point. So I said, no, what we are doing, that whole school of how to develop IT up to the point, to me, trashed. So, everything that I did so far goes to the trash. I want to start over in a smart way, not by the book, but by the people, for the people, by the people. That's how I fell in love with service design. That's why I don't have enough. I always want to know more. And there's so many interesting things to
What
explore.
was the field like 20
Hmm?
years ago? What was the service design field like 20 years ago when you first discovered it?
It was tiny, right? There were several nice initiatives in Europe, but in Brazil, none. I was uh, the first official service design in a large organization in Brazil was done by me in 2008. So it's like in 2 years from 2006 around to 2008, I was starting to understand and I had the chance to be the first official major service design project in Brazil done by me. Uh, and which was, there's another very interesting fact is that I did is, I guess the organization that I was involved with and the particular department I was involved with perceived how enthusiastic I was about listening to people. And the employees actually let their guard down and shared with me how they did things there. It was a service company. And at the end, I went and provide the final deliverable, right? What to do, how to do. And how do you say this? He very innocently presented to the CEO, said, "Hey, your team could be producing double. Look, if we move these things around, talk about efficiency, right? We could double their uh, delivery capacity." Awesome. Thank you, Mauricio. Awesome. 3 months later, half of the team was fired. So I learned another lesson, right? Keep always in mind to protect the stakeholders. That's in a way, right? Uh, today, I would say, okay, I would have to have added something that would enable to sell more service. So the team would be kept and the company would make more money, right? But so for a while, whenever I met these people, the half that were fired, they would look at me in a very, let's say, not friendly way, right? And they shared with me the way they were working was a very trust based relationship, and I got 50% of them fired. So that's another lesson that I've learned that I never made the same mistake. Was against everything I imagined my work would do. Right? I went to focus on listening to people and taking what they're saying very seriously. And I end up harming 50% of them. Uh, so now it's a balance. But anyway, that's the
You,
beauty of getting old. You start to collect very interesting events and experiences.
thank you for sharing that. Maurizio, you mentioned the shift in your perspective from moving forward after that moment in time. It was, how can you leverage your findings and your insights into enabling the company to sell more and preserve the integrity of the pre-existing team? I wonder if you could unpack that further and and explain how findings, when presented through one light, can potentially render harm to the people in an organization, whereas potentially the same findings or similar findings can be rendered through another lens to render a benefit and growth and support the flourishing of a team. At what point does that start? Is it truly the same data, or does it start at, is it sort of a root perspective that guides even the approach to listening and the structure of the project itself? How do you see that?
Yeah, it case by case, right? It's contextual. But you need to, when we say human centeredness, right, or um, focus on humans, uh, it's more than focusing on the stakeholders, right? So yes, right. Don't um, uh, uh, I'm not against profit at all, right? We're living in the US and but migrate to the US, capitalist society. I was working in a bank. So I believe that money is a interesting force to be worked with. Um, but you have to be human centered in that way, right? Uh, how, how it will impact when you, the term stakeholder, right? How it will impact them. What are the risks? And at some point, there's an ethical decision, right? It's, and I clearly uh, think that it's important to keep that in mind, right? There are situations that you can't save, right? So I imagine for now, for instance, we're developing this AI platform. And, um, when we tend to present the platform to show business, they say, "Oh, I could fire 90% of my people if I have this platform going." A specific case was interesting. Um, Without mentioning industry, whatever, but we were discussing a team of 200 people, and there were 5 to 8 that had specific knowledge. So one was a person that was really good at upselling. Another was really good at solving problems, complaints from clients. Another, so there were specific people that the manager said, "I would love to have 200 of these 8 people." And with the this platform that we are working on, the manager could keep that 8 people and scale each one of them to 200. The manager could have 2,000 of each one of them. We're handling 2,000 uh, items or tasks at the same time by each one of them, all while keeping that human factor, right? That touchy sensitiveness, that the person that knew how to navigate and evolving, right? Getting better each day because they were honing, right? Increasing their capacity. But again, the first thing that came to the mind of the manager was, well, I could fire 95%.
Mm.
But how, why, how to justify a different day? We'll have to research and try to figure out ways to preserve these 200 people or come to a conclusion and see inevitable and they will have to find something else to do. But anyway, we didn't get to this point yet, but it's a flag. Hey, we can't just go there and have 95% of these people fired unless we have something. to provide, right? But after all, if you fire, as my little understanding of AI and the prospects for a few years ahead, it might impact a lot. So there's no, okay, let's keep firing everybody. At some point, no one will have a job, and so, or most of the people be out of job. Uh, Maybe they all start a startup, right? They all start a small business somehow. But anyway, uh, it's there's no like one solution fits all, right? We will have to assess each case and see how can we impact. Uh, and it's kind of a military um, mindset, right? You can't just leave your fellow man behind, right? Bring them home, right? You have to find a way to bring them home
Hmm.
somehow.
There's something to a perhaps even intangible. There's something perhaps intangible to a company culture or a team culture that has a meaningful level of trust, of recognition, of belonging, and the sort of quality work that comes out of a culture like that, where it's genuine, it's authentic, where the organizational environment and the interpersonal dynamics are structured or cultivated in a way that people feel that psychological safety, where they know that the manager in the corner office isn't looking for ways to disintermediate the workforce, but looking to scale and grow and that they've got your back, to put it in those terms. That the team isn't going to be left behind, and certainly there's a different piece to that, which is there's a life cycle to people's roles in companies, I think. So
Sure.
there's always going to be some level of attrition, some level of transition from
Mhm.
staff. But I think one of the things you're helping illuminate in my mind as you share this is there's a very real business case to combat this hyperfixation on workforce disintermediation, or, oh, I can just use AI to get rid of 90% of my staff. And having a meaningful business case beyond the 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 ethical aspect, to say, oh, it may not be ethical to lay off the majority of your workforce just because you can. So it's like the ethical piece and it's connected to character and culture, certainly, but it may not always be weighty enough when compared as an executive to capital efficiency or profit margin. That, uh, in terms of if it was balanced, that would tip the scales. So I think you're
Wow.
you're representing a concept that puts weight on the side of investing in the people of an organization, on that side of the scale. So I think that's
No,
really meaningful.
no, we're having an exit way, right? Oh, we need to reduce the employee numbers by 10% every 5 years. Okay, but let's work. Let's create a design project. Takes this 10% of people and provide them an income or a small business
Mm.
or a spin-off, right? How many um, companies had people let go, and these people started a business that became the competitor, right? Several cases of this. Um, it would be better to have this, I don't know, the stake of the company into this new startup, right? At least you give them a ramp out. And if the startup doesn't survive, okay, but I had I invested in a startup that gives me like every 5 years, I take a bunch of people. I say, hey, this is a business that is potentially viable, and I'm providing you the chance to work on this. Like, it was exactly what happened to me right now, when we all left a bank, my previous work. We started, I didn't start. Some people started a business, and I joined to support their work. There's next step after leaving the company, right? This could be institutionalized, and the parent company, like your original company, could keep a stake, right? Some uh, potential buying options of the company itself, right? And so you give these people just to turn the ship around and show, create profit, create a business that can be then brought back to the company. That would be an interesting way of approaching this, right? Anyway, one of the many ways to approach this.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Take us back for a moment to the point in the journey you shared in Brazil. You were young at a earlier point in your career, almost 20 years ago. You had that second big lesson that you shared. First one being everyone in the room is a genius. The frontline users gathering the insights from them. The second one being seeking to do good and having a negative impact on the humans aspect of the workforce that seemed to really help hone in this human-centered perspective that you've cultivated over the years. How did things evolve from that point over the course of the last decade plus throughout your private sector and academic sector career growth, and how have you seen the field as a whole continue to evolve? What are the key aspects of that evolution?
So in terms of techniques, approaches, frameworks, it's easy, right? When I realized service design was the thing that I should be doing, scrape the whole thing I had prior and adopt this new approach. Go on. But there's also let's say a social structure that changes slowly, right? It doesn't mean it's dead, but it takes a while to change, right? If we, it's like the planting a tree, right? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago or now, right? It will take a long time. And the more gray hair you have, the more you understand this and you start to play along, say, okay, there are things that you can make it shorter, faster, but these structures in society, they take a while to change. And for instance, the work I did at some point, I was interested in what is a design-driven culture. Right? How can you assess if an organization has a design-driven culture? And I started to interview. I ended up interviewing officially 41 people, 27 actually, and the rest 13 were surveyed. But as a whole, I personally interviewed more than 50 people to understand what is a design-driven culture. And at some point, they would tell me, oh, design-driven culture is, you must have this aspect X. And I would always ask, like, okay, but eye level in an ordinary daily life of a worker, what this aspect X means. And people usually would tell me a very bad experience that they had in a company and would add at the end saying, if the company had this aspect X, that would not have happened. So I took notes of this bad experience. And at some point, this bad experience became so interesting that I stopped what I was doing and I need to write not about uh, what is a design driven culture in an organization, but why? And the experience were clustered in four very clear, different experiences, right? No matter who you were talking to or who it was, they would describe four different experiences. And I started to ask myself why designers work with under these circumstances, why they are experiencing those not so good experience in their workplace. And at some point, trying to understand this, I end up studying work from a sociologist from Sweden, Matt Alvinson. And he says that organizations tend to treat feminine traits like creativity, holistic, people, knowledge, right? People's people, like people that care about people, as feminine. And as you can see in many corporations, 90% of the CEOs are men. And so the point I want to make is although design-driven culture would be a framework easy to adopt, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, inclusivity frameworks can be easy to adopt. The design-driven culture is nested in the way society usually treats women. Anything that can be seen as creative is less cold-hearted, rational, and squared, right? It's seen as feminine. And anyway, that's what the point I want to make is like, although you can change the framework, an approach, there is a structure, a social structure that changes. Of course, women gained a lot of terrain in the last 50 years, but there's that gender pay gap, right? Or why we don't have more women CEO. Some people I heard very intelligent people saying, because women are not very focused. I said, what? So meaning no, women are not very good at business. That's very rude to say, right? Because it doesn't make sense, right? By your own means, it doesn't make sense at all. Nevertheless, you don't have as many CEOs as you have women in society. So things take a while, but you have to start. Will take a while until. Anyway, to make all this a little bit simpler, is like a framework. I would say it would be like a tool, right? The hammer. If you give me a hammer and a rock, I will break. Then you just have crumbles of rock. And if you give a hammer to Da Vinci and a rock, you have La Pietà, right? A magnanimous work of art. So that's the point. And I mean, me or Da Vinci would be the society, right? The society, the social culture that is using this hammer, this tool, or this approach will have a major influence of what you can achieve through this hammer, right? So does it make sense?
Yes, sir.
I try to land this in a simple comparison, but it's who's using those approaches. Sometimes I hear people say, well, no, let's do a service blueprint. Let's create a service blueprint and holding this hammer or whole day holding this hammer, right? Because if you don't understand what a service is. What's the difference between service and processes, right? If you bundle everything as process, what is the service print gonna do? It's like, again, giving me a hammer, giving the Vinci a hammer, right? I don't know if you will be able to do something nice with this hammer was, right? Nomadic is the same hammer. Oh, that's but it's a process, right? We're on that, we need to keep marching, knowing that we might not see the end of this journey, but we need to keep marching.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to be respectful of time. I think it's flying on us as we're having fun here, and I promise to start landing the plane when we reach around this time. So I think there's probably a lot that we haven't addressed that we could have, and I think would make perfect material or themes to explore and potentially a follow-on conversation.
Yes.
Is there anything like we haven't addressed in this discussion that you feel like we should?
Yeah, I'm interested in AI and how AI can be used by designers, right? And how this AI would impact at the end products, goods and services that they design, right? And I know you're interested in the same area for business. It's more of a major business, right? So there's a ton of things to be explored. Yes, but anyway, as you said, it's a whole new conversation.
I really enjoyed hearing you share some of the lessons that you've gained over the course of your journey, and getting insight into your perspective on the field, how it's evolved over the years. The anecdote of the hammer is a standout one for me. I think that's meaningful. And if I could be so bold as to propose that we're planting the flag here in our conversation to pick up in a follow-on discussion and explore more on your perspective on the future of the field, and how enabling technologies like these large language models and like self-taught reasoning and the overarching umbrella term of generative AI, how all of that is going to impact the virtual environment. I think that would be a fantastic theme to explore in the next one.
True. There's so many, especially when they crack the connection between LLMs and STAR, self-taught reasoning. Things will get very exciting and weird, for sure.
Before we hit record, you shared how it's going to be back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
When that emergence takes place, and so about being respectful to time, I'm looking forward to that conversation, Mauricio.
The same.
Thank you for coming on the podcast today.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, and please don't be shy. If you think we need or should continue this conversation, just let me know. It will be a pleasure to keep where we left off.
I'll take you up on that. Until next time.
Thank you.